What do Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler have in common with gang stalking? The words Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler are synonymous with some of the most notorious and horrific dictatorships in history. They are leaders who rose to power through manipulation, propaganda, and extreme violence. The atrocities committed by their regimes are well documented, and the horrors they inflicted on millions of people will never and should never be forgotten. But what do these individuals and their regimes have in common with gang stalking? Gang stalking is a phenomenon where an individual or group is subjected to systematic harassment and intimidation by a network of people. The harassment can take many forms, such as following the individual, spreading rumors about them, and vandalizing their property. The perpetrators of gang stalking are often anonymous and operate in secrecy, making it challenging, but not impossible for committed individuals to identify or bring them to justice. So, what do gang stalking and the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler have in common? At the heart of both is the use of power and control to intimidate and manipulate people. In the case of gang stalking, the perpetrators use their overinflated sense of power. As single entities they are totally powerless and useless to society as a whole, to harass and intimidate the innocent, always for no apparent or justifiable reason other than the sick, perverted and incestual pleasure they derive from it. Similarly, the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler used their stolen power to control and manipulate the masses through propaganda, censorship, and terror. Another similarity between gang stalking and these regimes is the use of fear as a tool of control. In the case of gang stalking, the perpetrators use fear to intimidate their followers into submission with a false sense of trepidation, purposely enticing the weak and malleable to do their twisted bidding. In their attempt to make the targets feel powerless, they fail. But in their attempt to get the weak to follow them, there is some success. This fear can be especially potent when the coerced and manipulated gang-stalking foot soldiers are intimidated by thoughts of isolation and may feel that they have no other choice but to carry out their dirty work. This is a fallacy, another falsehood perpetuated in order to gain control over the masses. In the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler, fear was also used as a tool to control the masses. Citizens who spoke out against these regimes or opposed their policies were often the heroes whose actions, courage, and commitment to basic human rights paved the way and set the bar higher for a more just and inclusive society with liberty, justice, and equal rights for all. When in reality, if they had banded together and stood up to the tyranny, victory would have been achieved much sooner, without so many lives lost in the interim. Perhaps most chillingly, both gang stalking and the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler are characterized by a lack of empathy and a willingness to inflict harm on innocent people due to their deeply embedded psychopathic tendencies. In the case of gang stalking, the perpetrators often have no connection to the persons and derive a sickening and incestuous pleasure from causing them distress. In many instances, these individuals, often in secret, are themselves deeply disturbed and involved in horrifying and unfathomable activities of an irreprehensible nature. In the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler, the leaders and their followers were willing to commit atrocities against entire groups of people, often with no regard for their well-being or basic human rights. Finally, all of these examples are characterized by a lack of accountability. In the case of gang stalking, the perpetrators often operate in secrecy because they are aware of the consequences of their actions and the very distinct possibilities of retribution when they are eventually brought to justice. Similarly, the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler were able to commit atrocities with little to no consequences for those responsible. In many cases, the perpetrators of these crimes were able to avoid prosecution and even rise to positions of power within their respective governments due to ambivalence and citizens turning a blind eye to their activities. Gang stalkers are criminals. In conclusion, while the phenomena of gang stalking and the regimes of Mussolini, Stalin, and Hitler may seem vastly different and we by no means attempt to diminish the horror and tragic consequences of their actions, they do share some striking similarities. Both are characterized by the use of satanically unregulated power and narcissistic control to intimidate and manipulate people, the use of fear as a tool of control, a lack of empathy, and a total and unbridled lack of accountability. By recognizing these similarities, we can better understand the dangers of these types of behaviors and work to prevent them from taking root in our communities and societies. Ladies and gentlemen, the only power these entities have is that which you give them. Do you know your history? Do you support what Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin did to their people? Do you want that to happen to you and your loved ones? Whatever you do, stand against tyranny, the lies, and the deception that those who gang stalks willingly and viciously perpetrate.